Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Time for Us with me, Danny Wallace, your host. Today we have another episode sponsored by Leonista, 100% Karoo Agave Spirit. And today, yet again, I have the Reposado Black in my hands, which is hands down one of my favorite versions of Leonista's delicious Karoo Agave. Look at me in my notes. Be more subtle, Danielle. I can't promise that I can be. Here's what I can tell you about Leonista. Leonista, the recipe that comes with this, is passed down from an age-old Mexican recipe that follows a similar process that it takes to create mezcal. I'm not sure if anyone listening enjoys mezcal. I always have. I think the smokiness of mezcal is delicious. It's not for everyone. It's got that kind of peaty taste, as some would say. I love it. That said, the process that they use to cook the agave is through smoke and fire, which is pretty obvious is why it tastes smoky. And that's about all that I have to tell you today about Leonista. If you haven't tried it, go ahead and try it. Today's conversation centers around father-daughter relationships. And I have hands down been delaying recording this podcast episode as much as humanly possible if I tell you the level of productivity I've managed to incite in every other capacity other than sitting down and talking about what I came here to talk about, you would be blown away. In fact, I'm even impressed with myself. Well done, Danielle. Well done. Well done. As you'll see, I've updated the podcast profile picture as we go into season 2. Part of the procrastination that I just mentioned about this podcast episode entailed me reshooting my headshot, which I have been delaying at all costs. So if that doesn't tell you what we're in store for, which is something that has been really challenging and remarkably confronting for me to put pen to paper and mind to microphone to discuss with you, welcome. Welcome to this episode, the first episode of season 2, and thank you for joining me. Just by the way, I have a notepad with notes on it. And if you see me glancing down at any point, it's because, in actual fact, I have not memorized a 30-minute podcast for you offhand. I do have some guiding points, so please bear with me as I touch base and re-anchor myself every now and again. But I'm going to start this episode with a story. I have always been a charismatic child. And I definitely inherited those characteristics from both my parents, but specifically, I would like to say, based on my perception, more my dad than my mom. My dad and I have very similar ways of carrying ourselves. And something that came to my mind when I was thinking about this podcast and how I was going to try and explain myself to you, create some common ground, one story kept recurring to me in my mind. And this story is one in which, join me as we go back in time to an age where I was in grade 4 or 5, can't remember specifically, but that means I was 9 or 10 years old, and it was Easter. At this point in time, I may have been living with my mom, so I used to come down to Durban during the school holidays to visit my dad, which in itself has created a whole perception of who my dad is to me. He was the holiday. He was the fun times away from my mother. But we'll carry on with the story itself. And on Easter, my dad at the time was seeing another lady, and she had a daughter as well. So it was my stepmom and her daughter, my dad and myself. And they decided to plan, as parents, an Easter egg hunt for us. They hid little beacon chocolate Easter eggs all over the apartment, and we were given the task of finding them. So it was like, on your marks, get set, go, off with you, the two of you. It was myself and Maxine, who was my stepsister, rummaging around the house looking for Easter eggs. What ended up happening was that Maxine found so many Easter eggs. I think she probably found 90% of them, and I had only found 1 or 2 of them. And every time I would be frantically looking around the apartment thinking, where next can I find an Easter egg, I would hear a squeal of joy as Maxine found an Easter egg, and she'd be like, wow, I found another Easter egg, and everyone would be like, well done, you're crushing it, you're so fucking brilliant. And then I was like, oh my God, I'm failing at this, I'm fucking it up, like I need to prove that I'm good at this. Anyway, what ended up happening was that I didn't get nearly as many Easter eggs as Maxine, which I don't think anyone had thought would be the outcome. They probably thought there would be a discrepancy of maybe 2 or 1 or 2 Easter eggs. No, not in my case. In my case, it was a situation in which I had found only like 2 Easter eggs, and my stepsister had found the majority of them. I remember running into the bedroom, closing the door behind me, slamming it shut, and bursting into tears, sobbing in the pillow and being devastated. And then also I remember the feeling of being ashamed that I was so petty and so childish, that I was sad about the fact that I couldn't find as many Easter eggs as my stepsister. Wow. I remember it becoming a whole hullabaloo in the household. I remember my dad having to come in the room and check in on me and say, is everything okay? I'm so sorry. It became like, I think Maxine had to share her Easter eggs with me and like was forced to give them to me. But I just remember this whole scenario. I can admit that this is a rather peculiar story to open this podcast up on, but in the preparation for this conversation around my relationship with my father and how that has influenced me, as small and as subtle as that memory might seem, it has stuck with me, and it's funny, it has often crossed my mind. I have often thought about it. In essence, what was being translated to me in that scenario was such that I needed to compete for attention. I was not as good as other people, and in actual fact was a little bit embarrassing. And it required some kind of like my dad almost stepping down from this other plane. It almost felt like everyone else was operating on this like mature adult plane, and I was some chaotic, immature imbecile. I always felt like I was being treated as if there was something seriously wrong with me, like I was missing the plot entirely, as if my feelings were overreactive or invalid. And it's an interesting and peculiar memory to hold root up until the age of 32. To build on to that, I would say that commenting on the fact that I've always been charismatic, and it does relate back to my father, as an only child, which I am, and being surrounded by other younger girls my age-ish, either a stepsister or my dad's best friend's daughter or whatever it was, there were other young women or young girls around me that represented me but weren't me. I adopted a role of being quite performative to try and get attention. And what I noticed in my youth is that every time I tried to get attention, it was met with, without being dramatic, some level of repulsion and a bit of dismissiveness. So it was almost like I was always constantly trying to be like, hey, look at me. And it was always like, oh God, there she goes again. You know, it was like, and I was like, no, but look, like I can do this. And then it was like, for fuck's sakes. Okay. Yeah, well done. Okay. Carry on now, you know? Truthfully, that need for acceptance and approval stems from the fact that my parents were divorced when I was very young. Whatever. And essentially, my father was absent. He was an absent father for a lot of what we can call my childhood and my upbringing. That was because, to some degree, it was out of his control. My mom won sole custody of me. I could only see my dad on school holidays. My mom, I lived with my mom. That was it. I didn't have a say in the matter. The judge, the court, the jurisdiction of the country decided Danielle is living with her mother. Norman, you can visit Danielle whenever Jacqueline says it's okay. That said, I would like to add that whenever it came to the crunch, whenever the cookie crumbled, my dad did show up and take care of me when necessary. So when my mom was going through a bit of like a hectic situation financially or with her career, and she needed my dad to take care of me, my dad did always take me in, which I honor him for. I really do. But what's also been interesting to me is when I look at my relationship with my dad and my relationship with my mom, I can see how there's a distinct bias. And I think that stems back to the fact that I was forced to live with my mother. She had sole custody of me. She was not well. She had gone through a divorce. She was just, I think even before that, not well. So she was not in a good space, unstable emotionally and psychologically, very destructive. And when it came to my father, he was this reprieve from my relationship with my mother, who I was forced to be with. So I can own the fact that I have a very strong bias towards my father and a bizarre way of exemplifying him from what happened to me as a child. I look at him and it's funny because I resent my mom to some degree. And I think about her and I'm like, this is unacceptable. It's infuriating. And then for my dad, I'm like, oh, well, I just somehow pretend like he did not have an active role. Even though it might have been passive, it was still active and it was still a role that's been played. So I'm just putting that out there as a disclaimer. That is a little bit of a precursing story to, I guess, the fundamental question that I'm planning on cracking down into. And that is what I posed in my Instagram posts that I put out. It's the question of how your father-daughter relationship influences your perception of a partner, and by virtue of that, helps you derive the answer to the question, whom do I deserve? So I sat and I've journaled and I've thought about it, and I started at the end and I worked my way back and I came to some answers. If I get to the kicker, if I just cut straight to the chase, I will say this. And that's that romantically, I have always chosen a partner who plays a parental role, whom I then despise for doing so. So I choose a partner who takes care of me, who guides me, who has an opinion on my behavior, whatever it might be. I seek them out, I elect to be with them, and then when I'm in it, I develop this way of seeing them that I'm like, oh my God, you're influencing my behavior. You're trying to guide how I live my life. And then I turn whatever I initially went into the relationship with seeking into something that I utterly despise about my relationship with this person. Wild. I can see this with several of my boyfriends. We have Travis, who was my first long-term boyfriend. I dated him for 5 years. His family provided extreme support and stability to me. I talk about him in my Christianity podcast that I posted a little while back. What came with that was him constricting or judging and controlling me around religion and around my history. So he made me feel like shit because I had a sexual history and he didn't have one before me. So it was like this dynamic in which I'm being taken care of, but I'm being made to feel like shit at the same time. Skip a boyfriend, we'll jump into Gavin. Gavin was my first boyfriend in Cape Town. Gavin taught me a lot from a point of view of understanding morals and integrity. He was 12 years older than me, is 12 years older than me. I valued that relationship a lot. And again, speaking to the reparenting, he taught me things about standing by your word, not lying, which is crazy for me to even say that that was how I was operating, but it was to some degree. He really reparented me in a huge way. I was honestly in some kind of a fucking, I don't know, like the movie The Fog. I was delulu. I was like, I couldn't see my ass from my elbow. He had me by the balls mentally. And it took the universe slapping me out of that relationship for me to realize, oh fuck, I don't even know who I am or what I'm doing. But I was so devoutly loyal to this person, which is interesting. But needless to say, skip past that, to relate it to this current podcast, it's the fact that I chose to be with someone who, again, played this parental role and helped shape me. And I took lessons and learnings from that. Next boyfriend, Aaron. I love Aaron. I'm like, we love Aaron. We love him. I love him. He's a gem. He's an angel. Yet, here we stand. And I can see again, I've chosen a partner who is teaching me another lesson. And the lesson is around finance, money, and financial discipline. Just discipline in general. Gravitate towards this person for that reason. And truth be told, here we are in our relationship. And those exact things that I think my soul gravitated towards him for are creating resentment. And I'm like, this person doesn't love me for who I am. They don't fucking see me. It's just like I have to constantly be something better. Nothing I am is enough. No matter what I do for any of these partners, it's just like you don't love me for who I am. So I was listening to a podcast the other day, and there was this relationship coach on the podcast, and he made this statement, and I'm going to read it back to you. I actually wrote it down because I was like, holy fuck, are you talking about me? I don't know what you're talking. Was that directed at me? Let me read it to you. So it's talking about relationships and your perception of your partner. And this is what it says. Something about that person solves something you're missing, but will eventually allow it to keep perpetuating. And I was like, as soon as I heard that, I thought, holy shit. That is, I think, maybe every relationship I've ever had, but at the very least, the relationship I'm currently in which I've sought something out, which I was missing that I needed, and now that I'm in it, is enabling me to perpetuate the same thing that I sought to resolve, and by virtue of that, I resent the person for it. What the fuck? Should we? Oh my God, guys. Oh my God. I can't. So, in essence, it's almost like I've graduated in my life from boyfriend to boyfriend, from relationship to relationship, taking lessons, taking notes, evolving, changing, and then moving on. And it's been through this exercise of preparing for this podcast that because I put something out there and I was like, oh, well, let me create some content around father-daughter relationships. Here's a question. And, I didn't know where answering that question was going to take me personally. And it's taken me somewhere that's been quite confronting. So on the last point I made about learning lessons and moving on, I've had to ask myself the question, why do we do that? Why do we move on? Why do we move on? You don't have to do that. Like, you can be in a relationship, you can take learnings. You don't have to be at a point where you think, okay, I'm out. Because that's what I've done. And I'm a serial monogamous. I go from relationship to relationship, very rarely single. It's just from one partner to another. And the moving on aspect, if I have to really think about it, I think comes from an element. Okay, first of all, I don't know if I believe in lifelong love, as in till death do us part, one soulmate, one life partner, like, oh my God, that's it. I found you. It's us till the day we die. It happens for some people. I don't know if it's something that I believe in. Aside from the fact that it's debatably fictitious. Don't want to sound cynical. Debatably fictitious. Largely fairy tale-esque. Sounds a bit like a Disney movie. We'll move on. We'll pack my cynicism away and try and move forward from that. And I've even thought, okay, why? Like, don't be cynical. Why is it that you don't believe in lifelong love? And I've come to the conclusion through this exercise of questioning my relationship with my father, how it's influenced my relationship with romantic partners. And it's because I actually do not trust men. I don't trust that they see me. I don't trust that they understand me. And I do not for one fucking second trust that they're going to stick around. That is an innate, deep-rooted belief that I've established that I have. It's funny because I've had Aaron say this to me all the time. Whether it's right or wrong, cool. You've seen something, cool. It's my hat. I'm tipping it to you. Put it back on. Well done. You've seen something. Whether that goes to apply to like a generic, like as in you're not doing something that's warranting my response. Do you know what I mean? Like whether it's like, oh, you don't trust men, or whether it's like, oh, actually you are not showing up in a way that I can trust you. Look, I'm finger pointing, not healthy. Well, whatever. But essentially, he has said this to me before. He's like, you don't trust men and all this jazz. And do you know what? That's the truth. That is actually the truth. I actually do not. I do not trust. And I have, because of that, because of my historical data that I've gathered, because of the experience of being this needy child, and children are needy, and there's nothing wrong with that. Needing love, needing approval, needing to be seen, just needing it. Oh my God, needing it. Can feel, you know, as I say that, I can feel that child inside of me. I can feel her. I'm still in pain when I tap into that. Because of all of that needing and not receiving, I was like, okay, this is not working out for me. I do not have the capacity to continually try to strive to expose myself in this way. I mean, I built a little wall, and then the little wall went from like, okay, just a little bit higher, then a little bit higher to, okay, I'm in a castle. Now all of a sudden I'm at the very top. No one can access me. And I'm like, cool, much safer up here. I've built this massive wall of protection around myself because I have been, as a child, in such need of reception, validation, and love. Did not get it from a male figure. And then decided, you know what? I don't need it. Oh my word. I was like, I thought I need it. I don't need it. And I'll be fine without it. Peace. Built this wall. And now I go through my life and I have truth. If I really look at myself and I look deep down, I do not trust men. Don't trust. And if I look even with more scrutiny at that statement, I can say that I don't trust people. I don't trust the world. I'm like, fuck, why would I? Why would I? I'm drinking wine while I do this podcast. So cheers to us. Because as I fucking love doing this. I fucking love it. I honestly love it. And it requires a lot of self-interrogation. And it is wildly uprooting. And really fucking pierces the veil. So I'm drinking wine while I do this podcast. Cheers to our fathers. Cheers to our boyfriends. Cheers to our fathers. Cheers to paternal figures, and cheers to exes. If you don't have a boyfriend, your father's not in the picture, cheers to all of them anyway. Yeah, it's been a very enlightening and I would argue to say entertaining and surprising journey, which is quite a thing to say because you would think that digging deeply into yourself wouldn't be as if you're watching a movie for the first time. Because it's things that I know. It's like I know this stuff, but then I come to these revelations and I'm like, what? No way, are you kidding? I didn't see that coming. Meanwhile, like, what do you mean you didn't see that coming? It's been like, what are you even saying? But somehow I have been surprised by the things that I'm uncovering in questioning myself in this way. So to answer the question, whom do I deserve? Which is the question that I put out to you all. There are many answers to this, but I will go with the one just for this episode. And that is the answer to that question for me, whom do I deserve? And that's that I deserve someone in my deep, innate, subconscious belief system, not as in I'm electing, oh, this is who I deserve. It's like clearly this is who you think you deserve on a conscious level. And that's it. I believe I deserve someone whose love I have to earn. And then when I don't earn it, when I chase that love and I chase that approval and I can't get it, I will say, oh, well, you don't love me for who I am. And then I'll despise you for the chase that I've incited. an interesting thing along the journey for me has been, aside from the fact that I'm like signing over my power and saying, I dub thee knight of whether I feel loved or not, to bestow upon me affection and sense of self-worth. Aside from that aspect, I've realized that I have this deep desire to be special, to be special. Like I need to be something exceptional and something special. And I need to constantly pursue. So, okay, we've mentioned Travis, we've mentioned Gavin, we've mentioned Aaron. I have another boyfriend in between Travis and Gavin, Calvin. With Calvin, I pursued this boy, this dude, like you don't understand. I pursued him. I was like, oh, I want this person. And like, if I think back on it, I'm like, why? Why? Because, and I can ask myself that question because I'm like, hey, I got it. I was in it. We did the thing. No offense. I'm not being rude to him, but I'm just like, why? And it was that need. It was beyond the man himself. It was beyond who it was. It was for me. I needed to know that you choose me. And if you give me any hint that you might not choose me, best you know I'm doubling down to change your mind. Same thing happened with Gavin. With Gavin, we had the most fucking tumultuous, honestly, that relationship blows my fucking tiny little noggin. Blows it. It blows it. Blows the nog. And when I look back on it, I'm just like, what? The bitch was on crazy pills. No, seriously, she was. The bitch was popping crazy pills like they were M&Ms because I pursued this relationship again. When I tell you pursued, Gavin wanted to break up with me. He wanted to leave me. He was like, I don't want this anymore. Like, I don't know. Let me tell you, all I was hearing was this, first of all, absolutely fucking nothing except for the fact that don't leave me. All I heard was, don't leave me. He was like, I was like, don't leave me. Oh, please give me a chance. I mean, like, what on earth? I look back and I'm like, honest to God, bitch, I love you. Like, I love you so much. I just want to give you a big, first of all, I want to fucking punch you in the face with love. And then I want to give you a margarita, a shaken margarita from the drinkery. They make really good margaritas. Then I want to give you a big hug. And then I want to fucking slap you again. Then I want you to look me in the eye. And I want to ask you, what the fuck is going on? When I think back, the level of like, just needing to be received, needing to be accepted. And it's not even about the fucking dude. It's about the fact that he's telling me no, or the fact that he's evading my grasp is the reason that I'm like, oh no, please. What the fuck? Shame, Danny. This is other Danny from a few years ago. This is other Danny. I love you. And you blow my fucking mind. So yeah, that is the interesting thing. And I'm going to read what I fucking wrote here verbatim. And that's that I could not accept them not wanting me, but I could very easily accept me not wanting them. Because as soon as we crossed the threshold of me saying, I'm over you, not really that interested. Let me tell you, that was like flipping a switch. Done, didn't think about it again, moved on with my life, living my best life, on to the next boyfriend, having the best time. I'm like, woo, up in the club, just working on I'm like, whoa, am I in a music video? Fucking life's beautiful. Up until that point, when I felt like the person who was in my crosshairs was like, oh, no, thank you. I was like, no, I need love and acceptance. Then as soon as I was like, oh, I have it. Ugh, okay, bye. Crazy. So what does all of this mean? What does all of it mean? The interesting thing is that up until now, I had never drawn any parallels between all of my boyfriends. I had always looked at them and thought, they're so profoundly different. I'm like, wow, I'm some anomaly. Every man I've ever dated is so unique in each of his own ways. And look at that one and look at this one. Oh, they're so beautiful. So yeah, I had this warped sense of reality that there was no common thread between all of my boyfriends because I'm such a fucking dynamic and versatile person. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, yeah, they might not look the same. They might all be vastly different from okay. I have a type. There are one or two spanners, but yeah, there's a thread of the type that weaves through that. But aside from that, like personality-wise and whatever the fuck else they brought into my life and our connection, also vastly different except for one common denominator. And that common denominator is that at some point, they were parenting me are parenting me. Erin is parenting me. And I need their approval to make me feel like I've accomplished something. I'm in pursuit of their little naughty bat. To bring it back to like my actual life, and that's that, part of the reason I moved to Komaki is because I was going through a fight with Erin. Things compiled. It's not the only reason I moved here, but part of the reason I ended up coming here was because of exactly what I mentioned earlier. I chose a partner who was strong, who is ambitious, who could guide me from a career point of view, steer me, bolster me up, give me their input, support me financially, and then along the way, kind of let go of the reins and ended up kind of coasting. It actually fucked our relationship up. To call a spade, it did fuck it up to some degree. And then, through all of that, which I sought out, be like, oh my God, you're just trying to control me. Oh my God, you don't love me for who I am. Again, oh my God, like there is no such thing as unconditional love in our relationship. And that's what I need. And it's also interesting because once again, love it for me, listen to a podcast with Esther Perel. For anyone who doesn't know who she is, she's a fucking fantabulous psychologist. And she speaks a lot on relationships. And one of the things that I heard her talk about was around how unconditional love does not exist. It's a fantasy. And that as adults, we need to choose what exceptions we make for another person because nothing is all rosy or all horrible. We are a dichotomy of aspects as a human being, and we need to learn when you decide to be with someone what I can accept as being something I don't like, because it's impossible for you to actually love someone unconditionally. You can choose to love them, but you can also be like, part of that decision means that I'm accepting the fact that you need me to show up in a certain way. You need me to be financially stable. You need me to be X, Y, and Z. Doesn't mean you don't love me unconditionally. That is what you are putting on the table as necessary to navigate a relationship. So let's put a pretty little bow on this whole thing. And here's what I will say. In writing up my synopsis of this whole thought experiment and saying to myself, okay, well, what does this mean? What are we leaving people with? What are you leaving yourself with? Whatever. Here's what I'll say. The greatest thing that jumps out to me along this whole process of understanding how my relationship with my father, how I identified with myself as a child, the push and pull that created and how that influenced the partners that I've chosen. The key thing for me is trust. And it's the fact that I lack that sense of innate trust. And I'm like, okay, cool. So then I was like, cool, that's a standout moment. Again, what does it mean? What does it mean? What are you going to say to people? What are you going to say to them? Oh yeah, I realize that trust's an issue. So guys, go home and you need to really start building trust exercises. I was like, no, this is all bullshit, because I don't know if I can sit and say, oh guys, I've written this podcast. I've spoken about this podcast. You won't believe it. I trust people now. No, that's not what's happening. In actual fact, I'm looking at myself and thinking, how do we get there? Will you ever? I'm like, will I ever? Because that's how deeply entrenched this belief system is. Here's what I came up with. I need to work on trusting myself first. Well done, Danielle. How profound. But here's why I say that. It's because of the fact that I have been making these subconscious decisions that have influenced my quality of life. It's almost like you wake up from a nap and I look around me and I'm like, what the fuck? How do we get here? How do we get here? Like, why are we with this? Why are we in this relationship? How did we have no money? Why are we stressed? What the fuck? You're dating this person. And then I won't lie to you, I rarely take take radical responsibility and accountability for my life. I really try to. So often when I end up in those situations, I'm like, hey, wait a second, let's just reverse a little bit. Think about it. I'm like, cool, we can be mad at everyone around us, or we can just take a second to say, cool, you're the reason we're here, babe. It sucks to be the one to tell you, but yeah, it seems like you've kind of made some decisions about our lives and who we are and who we want to be with and how we want to live. And it's kind of like you're the reason we're here. So, and I've had those moments with myself where I'm like, cool, I'm the reason I'm here. Doesn't help because I'm still like, how did we get, still why? I'm like, still why? And I think that whole journey in myself and in my own psyche of saying, okay, cool, responsibility for my situation. I'm here. Why am I here? Let me try and deduct or reduce as to why I am. When you're so deeply in something, it's hard to, I guess, like gain any kind of, or what's the word for that? Glean. When you're in a situation so deeply, it's hard to glean any of those high level concepts and be like, oh, wow, that's why, because you're in it, right? So you're just flailing and you're just like in chaos and you're just thinking, for fuck's sakes, just trying to put one foot in front of the other. Doing this exercise has made me realize, okay, cool, I've learned something about myself. Oh, wow. Danielle, I see you. I understand you better. This is fascinating for me. And by virtue of that, build self-trust, because I'm like, okay, I see you now. Okay. By seeing how my subconscious worldview is influencing the decisions that I'm making day to day, that influence my quality of life. In the past, I would have felt like I didn't have control of it. And you know what? There's definitely things in my life that I don't, that I'm still going to fuck up and I'm still going to be like, oh, wow, how did I end up here? And I'm going to have to unpack and figure that one out. But for this one, I've made a step in the right direction. And that's understanding myself. Seeing myself, actually clocking my blind spots means that I can be like, oh, okay, I have a more spherical understanding of who you are. That means that the next time we make a decision, I'll have that blind spot in mind, and it means that I possibly won't make the same mistake again. Or if I do make the same mistake and I end up in the exact same situation, I'll have more understanding as to how I got here. That alone is building self-trust. It's actually building trust for the world that I'm building around myself. Not so much relinquishing this power and saying, oh, I need to trust the people around me. Yeah, cool, okay, look, fine. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that. It's just hard for me to imagine that. Isn't that crazy for me? It's really hard for me to imagine that. I'm like, whoa, wait a second. Whoa, what did you just say? I just spaced out. I mistrust other people. Fucking diabolical. Literally diabolical. Diabobos. So, I mean, for anyone who follows this podcast, hopefully in 3 years' time, I'm like, you won't believe it. I developed all this innate, deep self-trust, and like I trust the whole world. Look, I do. I trust that there's a greater good out that supports me. I'm not like a completely mistrusting person, but what I will say, what fucking freaks me out is the concept of signing my trust over. And I have realized now, no, the first step is working to trust myself. I need to work to trust my own decisions. I need to know myself enough to know that wherever I end up is one in which is coming from an enlightened point of view. It's coming from a place, the best place that I can be at for right now. And I'm fucking grateful to this exercise, and I'm grateful to this podcast, and I'm grateful to you guys for listening. That has helped me do this level of self-interrogation. Otherwise, it just feels like I'm subconsciously fighting against myself the whole time. It's like I'm making decisions. I'm playing chess with an imaginary partner who is myself, who's winning the game. And every time I look down at the chessboard, I'm like, well, how the fuck did we get, why am I in check? I'm in check. What do I do now? It's like it's a reactive dynamic, as opposed to having a complete bird's eye view of the situation and saying, I feel like you're going to move that fucking pawn, or you're going to move that castle over here. Let me see how I can engage with that, as opposed to being like, oh shit, I blinked and looked at the chessboard and now I'm screwed. So yeah, it's an interesting way of seeing things. I'm no guru, as I try to always reinforce. But I really hope that this conversation and like the thoughts and the things that have come up somehow make you just pause and just think, how did I end up where I am now? First of all, actually ask yourself, are you happy? If you're happy, then that's fine. If you're happy and you're like, wow, I'm happy, I'm stoked with where. If you're like, wow, you know what? There's something that's off. Okay, cool. How did you end up here? How and why? Why did I choose this? Why am I choosing this? You know what I mean? That's what I'm going to leave you guys on. Something, a pondering, a piece of homework, I don't know what, a potential psychological breakthrough. Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope that you enjoyed it. Please, will you like and subscribe to Time for Us on Spotify or on any other platform that you get your podcasts. Please leave me a review. Let me know what you think. Send me a DM on Instagram. I live to please. I aim to please. And I do not take for granted the platform that I have. So thank you for joining me on the first episode of season 2. If you would like to support me as a creator to create additional content to figure my shit out, please will you subscribe to my Patreon. It is, I think, $5 a month. It just helps me as a creator create some kind of stability with which I can have options and not have to sell my soul to brands. That's what I don't want to do, guys. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. So help me, help you, help me, help you. All my love. I'll see you next time.